Hey there, welcome to Humans of Music, a Jackster podcast. My name's Rod Yates, and this is where I talk to music creators and industry professionals about their lives and careers, the ups and downs of their journey, and the lessons they've learned along the way. My guest today is British singer-songwriter Billy Bragg. Billy was 18 when his father died, and as he says in this interview, it brought his childhood to a crashing end. 12 years later, he finally addressed his dad's passing in the song Tank Park Salute, which is a beautiful tribute to his father that would take on even greater resonance when his mum passed away. But when most people think of Billy, they probably don't think of a song like Tank Park Salute, or a man who's written more love songs than political songs. Instead, they think of the political firebrand who championed the miners' strike in Wales in 84 and 85, and who in the mid-80s founded Red Wedge, which was this coalition of musicians that tried to engage the younger generation in politics in the hope of ousting Margaret Thatcher. But there has always been much more to Billy than his politics, and we talk about that in this interview and some of the misconceptions about his reputation. We also discuss fatherhood, his work with artists like Wilco, what it was like being around for the birth of punk rock, how he formed his first band, Riff Raff, in 1977, his involvement in helping rehabilitate prisoners in the UK, and so much more. One thing that struck me about Billy is that at the age of 62, he is still absolutely engaged and enthused about music and performing. A few years ago, he started playing residencies where he would perform 3 shows in a town, with the first night a greatest hits show, the second night focusing on his first 3 solo albums, and the third night his second 3 solo records. He's still taking that concept around the world with dates in Australia and New Zealand this April and May. So clearly Billy's work ethic is something to admire, and we started talking about where that work ethic came from.
Oh, I don't know. My parents both worked, and I'm a compulsive communicator. Mm-hmm. You know, if I'm not talking to you and your listeners, I'm up on stage doing a gig. I'm writing a book. I'm tweeting. I think that's part of it, and I feel sure I would be doing this even if they didn't pay me for it.
Right.
I'm one of those kind of guys, you know what I mean? I'd be busking out somewhere or playing down the pub every weekend.
Yeah.
I can't imagine not having that engagement. And it just makes you feel like you're still part of things. You know, I've not got the urge to. I mean, maybe not so tour as much and as hardcore as I used to, but having said that, though, in the last couple of years, I've been more touring than any time since the 1980s. So maybe my semi-retirement's over and I'm back in the harness again.
It was just a phase.
Yeah, when the kids were little.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you mentioned that your parents worked. Your dad worked for a hat maker, is that?
No, that's a very interesting... that's what it says on that. That must be someone got off my birth certificate. Because he was working as a hat maker, but most of the time when I was a kid, he was a warehouseman. He worked in a warehouse. And where I grew up, the main employer was the Ford Motor Company.
Yeah.
And when I left school in 74, they were employing around 40,000 people at their Dagenham plant. And there was probably that many people, again, employed in ancillary companies providing parts and services for Fords. And my dad worked for those kind of companies, and he would be, in charge of the warehouse. And, we never had a car, we had a company van.
Right.
Always parked outside the house. That's how we used to go to any, if there was a wedding, my dad would load everyone up in the company van and take us all off to the wedding. So, yeah, he was a warehouseman, was what he was.
Was that in your future, seeing your dad do that?
No, my dad died when I was 18, but before then, when he talked about what I would be, he wanted me to be a customs and excise man because we lived on the river and they were quite active along there, and it was a good government job, outside a lot. Not being a policeman, and
is that important?
I think so. Yeah, I don't think he would want me to be a copper, but he thought that was a good gig, but I had other plans. I didn't want to work in the car factory, which is all my mates was what I was educated to do, really, and all my mates went there, and I was desperate to find a way of avoiding that, and so. I wasn't any good at football. I couldn't box, so music became the option.
That was it.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that your dad passed away at 18, and you wrote the song "Tank Park Salute," which is a beautiful tribute to him.
Thank you.
How did his passing affect you?
Well, I was 18, and it kind of sort of brought my childhood to a crashing end, I suppose you could say. Everything changed, And he died in October 1976, and I saw the Clash in May 1977. So there's a start and a finish and a start there. One door closed, another door opened, and I was off doing that. Really, that was my escape into punk rock, into a different identity.
Yeah, and did you need that escape at that time? Because that's a big thing to deal with.
I think I did. Because it made me feel that there was something exciting here, something to get me away from where I've been before, something that sort of like had a year zero effect to it, and that's what it felt like with my dad dying, but like year zero.
Yeah.
And so it was just me, my mum and my brother, and my mum took it very hard, but we never talked about it. The hospital told us the best way to deal with it was not to talk about it, which is stupid, really. When I think about it, I really regret that now. So we never really talked about it much. That's
strange advice, isn't it?
It's strange advice, but when I think I've gone over it in my mind many times. My dad never said anything about it while he was dying. He could have easily said, I think I'm dying, but he never said nothing. So we never said nothing. I really didn't say anything to anybody about it till I wrote Tank Park Salute. That was writing that song was a real watershed for me in that, because I knew if I sing this song, people are going to want to talk to me about not just about my loss, but their loss as well. So I better be prepared for that. Am I prepared for that? So it was quite therapeutic to me. So when people tell me it allows them to get access to those feelings of loss that they have for someone, I always say, well, that's exactly what it does for me, mate. I totally appreciate what you're saying. Yeah. That's the same way that I access my feelings.
Yeah, because it took you quite a long time to write that song.
It did, yeah. So 12 years after Dad died, I wrote it. And even then it was accidental. I was writing another song around that riff, that descending guitar riff. And a line came up, I closed my eyes and when I looked, your name was in the memorial book. And it kind of opened the door to that in a way that I wasn't really expecting. And I thought, if I go down this path, it could be very strange indeed. But I did go down this path, and it ended up being one of the best things I did in terms of songwriting, and the way it sort of connects with people and it connects with me.
Did your mum get a chance to hear it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. What did she think of it?
She asked me to play it at her funeral.
And how did that? I
didn't physically sing it. We played the tape, and none of my cousins would speak.
Wow.
Unless I put it right at the end, because I was putting it together, and I told she was like, well, she had a kind of really strange experience with it, a really strange relationship with it, because she always wanted to hear it. Whenever I came to the gig, she would say to me beforehand, are you going to play that song? She never called it Tank Park Salute, she called it that song.
Right.
And it always made her cry. And my nephews used to say to me, why do you keep playing that song that upsets Nan so much? It really upsets her. Why do you keep playing it? I'm like, boys, go and talk to your grandma. That song. So when she got ill, she said, we were talking about she had wanted a Nat King Cole song and a crazy line dancing song at her funeral, because that's what she, for all her line dance, because that's what she did. She went to sort of like tea dances. That's what her hobby was.
Yeah.
She loved that. She wanted that. It's a crazy, dreadful song. The Nat King Cole song is beautiful. And she said, oh, and I want that song. I'm like, Mum, you're joking. And she was like, no. I said, oh, Mum, I have enough trouble singing that song anyway. I think of Dad all the time, and now I'll think of you as well. And she's like, exactly. So I was like, oh, yeah, I see.
Wow.
So, yeah.
What a thing to have written a song like that, though.
Well, it's fortunate that I was able to get the stars to line up. You can't just sit down and write a song like that.
Yeah.
It comes out of your subconscious. You tune into that moment. There's a twist and a turn, a door opens, and you can step out and be brave enough to go out there on stage and sing it.
Yeah. So I saw a quote from you where you said it took you a while to work out how to write a Billy Bragg song.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah.
What was the answer?
There was a quirkiness in there. There was a kind of I suppose, an ironic take on romance, in which I wasn't the hero. I was the kind of vulnerable fella who was doing his best. That was the That was the persona that really best reflected who I was, not the leading man, the best friend who kind of helps out.
Right.
So that, and I kind of discovered that when I was in Riff Raff, that was where the, you know, it was to come at romance in a more oblique way than I'd been coming at it. Not come at it directly.
Okay. So you discovered it quite early, because Riff Raff is back, what,
Whoa,
mid-70s?
Yeah, when I was about 22, 23. So I'd been writing songs since I was 12, really, sort of 12, 13, 14. So it took me a while. You know, during punk, I was writing songs that were a bit clashy and a bit Elvis Costello-y and a bit, you know, but eventually I lighted on something that didn't have, had little elements of the other things, but predominantly had myself front and centre, and I was quite pleased with that. And once I found that space, I tried to, you know, expand on it.
Yeah. Why did you start writing songs?
Well, everybody at school had to write poetry for class, so I wrote a poem. And the teacher was very impressed, and she wrote a letter to my parents I had to take home, which asked my parents if I'd copied it out of a book at home.
Wow.
And no, we didn't have any books of poetry at home. So then I get to read it out on local radio. So I thought, I might be good at this. And then everybody else stopped writing poetry and I didn't. So
What was that poem about?
it was about Jesus. It was about Jesus on the cross and coming back to save mankind. It's dreadful. But I was only 12.
Of course.
There's some nice imagery in it, though. I think it was the imagery rather than the content that impressed. Thinking back about it, it's only three stanzas.
Yeah.
I think it was the imagery that impressed the teacher.
But is that where that you talked earlier about having that need to communicate? Is that
Maybe, yeah.
back then?
Yeah, I think so.
You
Yeah,
had it?
Yeah, trying to. I mean, I've always been a huge fan of lyrics. You know, the two foundations of my sort of, both in terms of fandom, but in terms of writing, have been Paul Simon and Garfunkel, and Holland Dozier Holland, Smokey Robinson, the guy, you know, those guys at Motown, really, really great songwriters, you know, Tracks of My Tears, and you know, I Wish It Would Rain, and all those great songs.
Yeah. Did you have a cassette that had, or an 8-track that had Motown on one side and Paul Simon on the other? Or?
It was a reel-to-reel.
Reel-to-reel.
It had 2 tracks on the thing. You could record 2 different things on the same piece of tape.
Right.
And yeah, one of them had Sound of Silence, Bridge Over Troubled Water, and Parsley, Sage, Rosemary and Thyme. And the other one had Turn the Motown Chartbusters, volume 3, 4 and 5 maybe. It was basically the cream of Paul Charman's Big Sisters record collection.
Okay.
Paul Charman lived around the corner, and I could love my reel-to-reel machine weighed a ton, but I could get it, walk it around to Paul's and plug it in and sit silently. We had to sit silent because it was through the air. You couldn't jack to jack it. And yeah, that for a long time, that was all I listened to. That was my bread and butter. You know, I sort of was constructing imaginary top 20s that was just all Simon and Garfunkel. And Scarborough Fair was always top.
Yep.
And years later, I did that just out of interest, that thing on iTunes where you see the song you've played the most at the Scarborough Fair. Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Still?
It was a while ago now, but yeah, probably not that now, but it was then, and it just made me smile.
So when does the guitar enter the picture? You're writing poetry?
I'm writing songs. I'm writing songs, but just keeping the tunes in my head.
Really?
Yeah.
What, you've just got chords in your head and...
No, just tunes, not chords.
Right.
Just tunes. Just tunes in my head, written songs with tunes and keep it a tune in my head. And then the kid next door taught me to play guitar. I heard him playing his electric guitar through the wall. He was 2 years younger than me. He was 14 and I was 16. I just left school. This was 1973, 74. And I tried to learn guitar, but I just hadn't managed to do it. And my parents bought me a Spanish guitar for the end of exams, happily before the results come in, because they were rather disappointed by my results. But yeah, this kind of like £16 nylon strung Spanish guitar. And the kid next door, Wiggy, taught me how to play the Rod Stewart songbook. and that's what we did.
That was the start.
Yeah. So that started me off. That started me off on a complete different songwriting jag. And Wiggy as well. Sort of Wiggy would come and see me with a riff. He'd come up with a riff, and we would be in my mum's back room cranking them out, writing songs.
That's great. And your voice is uniquely yours. Like, how long do you think it took you to get comfortable with it?
Punk. It took punk really to get me comfortable with it.
Okay.
Before then, I was trying to sound like other people. The thing about punk was it was self-empowering.
Yeah.
So it kind of once you got that idea, it doesn't matter what other people think about you.
Yeah.
You don't have to wait for someone to come and say, oh, you could be a singer, or you could be you just do it.
Yeah.
The Clash were all the things that we liked about the Rolling Stones, but our age, and that's what was impressive about it.
Yeah.
It's that moment. I think everybody needs that moment where you think, I could do that. Because the bands that we were into, the Stones, the Faces, Nils Lofgren, Dr. Feelgood, all those kind of bands, they were all a bit older than us.
Yeah.
And we couldn't imagine how to get from being kids up there. But when we saw the Clash, and they were the same age as us, as were the Jam, that kind of had a salutary effect on us all.
Yeah.
Me more than anybody else. So I went home and cut my hair and threw away my flares, got some drain pipes and a plastic leather jacket. And I was punked myself out.
That's great. And so was Riff Raff still playing at this time?
Yeah, this was Riff Raff, yeah.
This was
Riff Raff time, yeah.
Okay. And because that, as you said, that was around about the time of the punk explosion. Where did you fit into that?
We kind of fitted in the kind of also-rans. We managed to get a record out on Chiswick Records at EP. I was led by a song called I Want to Be a Cosmonaut that I wrote, which was the first sort of punk-shaped song that I ever wrote. That wasn't sort of nice chords and wasn't trying to sound like Jackson Browne or the Eagles or something like that, which we listened to a lot in those days, or Bob Dylan. So that was quite angular. And we all went up to this, we went on holiday together to this residential studio in Northamptonshire. And it was quite a catalyst for the band, because we kind of, the people that we went to stay with, the O'Loughlin's, Jackie and Ruin, they were the first real people to say, oh, you're actually pretty good at this. And they got us a gig at the end of the week as well, we went and played, which we hadn't really done before. And I just wrote a load more songs. It just kind of went off like a rocket.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were just playing, second fiddle to bands around the pubs in London during 78, 79, places like the Marquee, the Rock Garden. We might be out headlining the Rock Garden, but we'd be supporting at the Marquee, maybe supporting at the Nashville. So the tail end of pub rock and the beginnings of punk, we were somewhere between the two.
Okay. And I saw, once Riff Raff split up and you joined the army for 3 months, I saw a quote from you where you said that you hoped that cured you of your pop ambitions. And I thought cured was a really interesting word because it suggests a sickness.
Yeah, well, it had all come to nothing. We put all that effort in and it had come to nothing, and all the things I'd hoped that punk would do, it hadn't happened. So I needed to. It was it's more of like pressing the eject button on your previous existence and going and doing something totally different that had no relevance to it, and that no one would judge you for being in a band that failed. I didn't want to be sitting in the pub at home, that geezer who used to be in a band. I didn't fancy that. Yeah. And I sure as hell wasn't going to go and work at the car factory. So the army seemed to be a way of another year zero, if you like, it's quite a punky thing to do, I thought. Yeah.
It didn't last long. It was £175 to buy yourself
that's true.
Out of there?
That is true, yeah. Best £175 I ever spent. That was good.
Right.
When you've driven one tank, and you've driven them all, mate.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it. You've done it. You don't need to keep doing it.
I think am I right in thinking that at one point you did some goat herding?
That was previous. You've got a bit ahead of yourself. The studio where we were in Northamptonshire was a sort of a rural retreat, and we all had to, when we moved there, we all had to take up jobs, and I ended up having to look after the goats, and I wasn't very good at it, and not through any fault of mine. They all died. One of them got run over. 3 of them ate things they shouldn't have eaten, and one of them inadvertently hung himself. Oh. So I don't know a lot about goat husbandry. Right. But if you need anyone to bury a goat that the foxes can't dig up,
you're the man.
Yeah, 6 foot, goat in, rocks on top of the goat, earth on top of the rocks, on top of the goat, rocks on top of the earth. The foxes won't get through that.
The things you learn.
You know, the one that they didn't do the way when I was away, I told them how to do it, and they didn't. Its head was on the lawn the next morning.
Oh dear.
Which was a shame because it was the kid's pet goat, and they were trying to keep it from him that it had died. So,
oh no.
Yeah, I'm your man for goat burying.
When we come back from the break, Billy talks about his ambition as a young songwriter and the creative way he managed to land his first record deal and radio play. Welcome back to Humans of Music and my interview with Billy Bragg. Early on in our conversation, Billy mentioned how he wanted to avoid a life working in a car factory, and he had this incredible drive to forge a career in music. He also had unshakable belief in his abilities, as he demonstrated by how he got John Peel to play his music on the BBC, and the way he landed a record deal, which is where we pick up the conversation.
I was working in a record shop with a guy who bought a new, brand new thing. Was a what was it called? Porter Studio, something like that. Little cassette studio with faders on it. It was a brand new technology thing, and he wanted to test it out. So one Sunday I went round his mum's house. He lived in a block of flats in Silvertown. And I went round his mum's, and he set up, and he kind of like made my demos for me, cassette demos. So then I was sending these cassette demos off to record company people and getting nowhere. So then I started going to the record company and demanding to, if you got a name, you know, demanding to see these people. And usually it got fobbed off, not in, can't see you, not around. So I ended up going to Charisma Records to see Peter Jenner. I got his name off a mate of mine who painted backdrops for bands, and he'd done one for The Clash, and he'd met Jenner. Jenner was managing The Clash at the time. And he'd met Pete, and when I explained to him I needed a sort of cross between a father figure, a manager, and a political sort of commissar, he said, "Oh, I know someone like that, Peter Jenner." And so I found out what he was. I rang his office, and he said, "Oh, he's not managing anymore. He's at Charisma Records. He's A&Ring." So I thought, "Oh, that's handy. I need a record deal." So I went to see him, and at the time I was working with Wiggy, dear old Wiggy. I was still working with him, and he was making audio-visual presentations for companies, and at the time, not many people had a VHS player. So to do the presentations, we would take a portable VHS player. While Wiggy was doing the spiel, I would crawl under the telly and plug it in and tune it in, and he would show the film. So I'm waiting at Charisma Records and getting nowhere and thinking, I'm not going to see this person. I'm sitting in the foyer, and this woman sticks her head round the door and she says to me, "Are you the bloke who's come to tune the video?" And I'd said, "Yeah, I am, yeah." Which was a tiny lie, because I could tune the video. I hadn't come to do that, but I'm quite happy to have a go. And so I went in, and they wanted to take Peter Gabriel on the first edition of The Tube.
Okay.
So I crawled under their telly, tuned in their video. So I wasn't completely bugging. I did actually tune the video in for them. And we all stood around watching it, all standing around looking at it, watching it. And I said to this woman, "Is Peter Jenner in?" She said, "Yeah, it's him over there." I said, "Oh, thanks." So I sidled up to him and gave him my cassette, and the rest is history.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it is incredible. But that's, you know, you have to, when those moments come, you have to take them.
Are there other moments in your career where you've seen an opportunity and really seized it?
Yeah, I mean, you sort of find something comes across your desk every now and then, people asking you to do stuff, and you look at it and you think, yeah, it's kind of a bit sort of arm's length thing. But every now and then someone comes up with an idea that you think, yeah, this could really make a difference, this. And about 11 years ago, 2007, I got a request from a guy in a prison nearby who was teaching guitar to engage inmates in rehabilitation. And he said, "Have you got any spare guitars? Because I really could do some good work here, but I haven't got the guitars." So I went and bought some cheap Spanish 9-string guitars, half a dozen of them, went to the prison, gave them the guitars, spoke to the men there, and I thought, you know what? This is really actually something we should be doing, because, you know, rehabilitation is a really, really important aspect of prison life. You know, people aren't sent to prison to be punished. They're sent to prison. Punishment is to go to prison. Then we've got them there. We can do a lot of things with them, potentially. Rehabilitation is probably the most important thing. So over the last 12 years, I've been putting guitars into British prisons. Anyone who plays an instrument will know that when you're playing it, it allows you to momentarily transcend your surroundings. So imagine what that's like if you're in prison.
Yeah.
It's really, really crucial. It doesn't work for everyone, but it's worth pursuing. So there was an example of someone coming with an idea that I could see could have practical, actually make a difference.
Yeah.
So I didn't only acquiesce to their request, I sort of picked it up and run with it. And now myself in the UK, Wayne Kramer in the United States of America, he does the American version of it. I'm much more focused than I am because he has a whole connection with the prison system there because of his own incarceration and his work with Narcotics Anonymous.
Yeah.
He's on a much greater scale than I am, but it's named after a Clash song, Joe Guitar Doors.
Yeah, great.
And the song that he's in, the first line of Joe Guitar Doors is, let me tell you about Wayne and his deals of cocaine, which is about Wayne getting set up by the feds and going to prison. And the funny thing was, when I met him and I was talking to him about this issue, because he was doing a Narcotics Anonymous thing in a prison in Sing Sing.
Right.
And he invited me and a load of other musicians. Had done a benefit, and the next day we went to Sing Sing. And on the bus I said, oh yeah, I do this thing in Britain called Joe Guitar Doors. It's named after a Clash song. Have you heard it? And he said to me, yes, Bill, I'm in it. I was so embarrassed. So when I saw Jonesy the next time, Mick Jones, who wrote it, I told him this story. Yeah. How embarrassed I was. And I said to Jonesy, and he said, yeah, I'm in it. And Jonesy said, is he? I didn't feel half so bad then. I didn't feel so bad if Jonesy had forgotten. But yeah, Wayne is just brilliant. He's so focused on those kind of things. He's a real, I think, real credit to that idea of the 60s. And it has never left him, that radical idea. He's got a new autobiography just come out. It's really worth a read.
Okay. And if we can just go backwards to John Peel.
Yeah, Peel, that was a... Pete Jenner... signed me to this obscure offshoot of Charisma called Utility. Well, I think he invented it. And he did it with the budget left over from another album that hadn't been spent. He didn't get any more money. He didn't ask anybody. He just used the budget. I think it was from a I, Royd record or something like that, he told me. Anyway, he pressed 5,000 copies of Life's Alright with Spy vs. Spy. Went to see him, very excited. He gave me a box of 25. I said, see if you can get some radio plays. I said, I thought you were supposed to do that. He said, get out. Get out of my office, you little blagger. Come on, you blagged yourself a record deal. So I went to Radio 1, the BBC Broadcasting House, and I left copies for John Peel, a few other DJs. And the next day, I think, I was in Hyde Park playing football with my mates. And we were standing around someone's car having some beers afterwards, listening to Radio 1 to Kid Jensen, who was on before Peel. And Peel came in to say what was on the show. And he said to Kid Jensen, I would do anything for a mushroom biryani.
Yep.
My ears perked up. I thought, hang on. So Hyde Park is the other end of Oxford Street from Broadcasting House. I got out of my football gear, walked down, round the back of Oxford Street, there's curry houses galore. So I got this mushroom biryani, went to the BBC and... said to the commissioner, mushroom biryani for John Peel. Commissioner rang him up. But mushroom biryani's here. So he'd come down. To get it off of me. So that then allowed me to say, my name's Billy Bragg. I left a record, Life's Alright, Spy vs. Spy. It'd be great if you could have a listen to it. And he's like, oh, all right, okay. So I went home, tuned in to Peel, and sure enough, he played Milkman of Humankind, first track side one, at the wrong speed, which was great because it was a 45 RPM 12-inch, so it's a bit of... But the lovely thing was at the end of it, he said, thanks very much for the biryani, Billy, but I would have played it anyway.
That's great.
And he was my staunchest supporter in Radio 1, God bless his soul. So
nice.
It was, it was a true story. People asked me about it, if it's apocryphal. I'm like, no. It all happened, yeah.
Did you manage yourself back when that album first came out?
No, Pete did.
No, when the album first came out. Wasn't there a period where you managed...
Kind of, but basically what happened was, shortly after Life's Alright came out on Utility through Charisma, Virgin bought Charisma Records. And Pete Jenner really doesn't like Richard Branson. He's like... So I went there one day to see Pete talk about the record, and he's clearing his desk. So I helped him clear his desk, and I said, what are you going to do now? He said, well, I suppose I have to go back to managing. I said, oh, good, I need a manager. So he started managing me. And but the trouble then was that, Charisma had the record and they weren't going to do anything with it. So there's this little record label in West London called Go Discs, run by a guy named Andy McDonald and a woman called Leslie Simons. And they were interested in me. And we had a meeting at Charisma to say, look, would it be possible? You've only got Billy, they only signed me for one album. They didn't sign me as a deal, they weren't really interested in me. Would it be possible for us to get Billy's record and put it out on Go? And the Charisma guy said, no, Billy's a Charisma record. I think he has a great future. And Andy McDonald said, I'll give you $1,000.
Yep.
And the Charisma guy said, you're all right. And I got transferred like a football player.
Right.
So thanks to Andy McDonald and Leslie Simons, we're away with the record. We have another bite, and they re-release it in the autumn of 1983, and it goes to the top of the indie charts, and we're off.
Yeah. So when you think about when you start working with Peter and working with the Go Discs people, people have experience in the industry. Did they give you advice back then that still rings true to this day?
Bing Crosby once said, I asked Bing Crosby why he was successful, and he said, I got good advice and I took it. And that's the secret of my success as well.
And what was that advice?
Peter Jenner encouraged me to resist taking big advances from record companies and instead to ask for reversions. So only to license my material to the record company for a period of 7 years. Now, at the time, it wasn't a big problem for me because I was solo. I didn't need a huge advance, so I recognise I was in a privileged position in that case. But it kind of made sense to me because they'd only signed Life's Alright just for the one record. When they wanted the second record, Go Discs, Pete said, "Yeah, we'll sign that one, but you've got to give this sister one back in 7 years." And when it came to the third record, this record was coming back to us in 4 years. The middle one was coming back to us in 6 years. We signed yes for the third record, but the second record went on the timescale of the first record, 4 years. And so eventually, my entire back catalogue came back to me, which I still own today.
Yeah.
Now, Andy McDonald at Go Discs really didn't like this. It really used to frustrate him. And he and Pete used to have the most almighty rows about it. And he would come up with ever more increasingly ridiculous amounts of money. But ultimately, Pete would send me in to see Andy, and I'd sit down across the desk and Andy and say to Andy, "Look, Andy, I'm paying for this record, aren't I? You're giving me advance, but I'm going to pay it back to you. So I'm actually me paying for this record, aren't I?" He's like, "Yeah." So I said, "So okay, I wrote it and I made it. Who should this belong to? Whose retirement fund should this record be? Mine or yours?" And he'd say, "Yours." And sign it, and we'd sign the deal. And just as well, because Andy McDonald doesn't own Go Disc anymore.
Okay.
It disappeared into Universal. Nobody owns Go Disc. And had I signed that lifetime deal, the majority of the royalties for that record would be going to some faceless individual, not me, not Andy. As it is, I own it. So as a consequence, because of the fabulous deal that I have with Cooking Vinyl, which is also a artist license deal, I get 85% of the royalties. I pay for my own promotion, I pay for my own pressing, but I get the lion's share. So I'm going to pass all these rights on to my family.
Okay. So when people think of defining moments in your career, there are certain things which always tend to come up. The 1984 miners' strike, Red Wedge in the sort of mid to late 80s, the Mermaid Avenue albums with Wilco. What do you see as defining moments in your career other than those ones?
I think the birth of our son probably was pretty defining about how I look at things and how I tour and how I do the job. I think if parenthood don't change your perspective on everything, you probably ain't doing it properly. That's my opinion of it. So that's the before and after for me. really in times out.
How do you see the difference?
Before I was happier on the road.
Okay.
Afterwards, I was happier at home.
Okay. And your son plays music?
24 years old, yeah, he's in a band, yeah.
Yeah. Does he come to you for advice?
Not about songwriting, about stagecraft. That's the thing he talks to me about. His music is more keyboard led, it's a bit more EDM. But yeah, if he's had a night where he the audience hasn't connected with him, he comes and says to me, I did this, I did that. What happened here? And I'm like, well, it was Saturday night in a student bar, and you're an unknown band. Most of the people who are in the bar are trying to get laid. They're not really come to see a band. Did anyone pay attention? He said, yeah. I said, what? Like, he said, about 25 people. I said, did you give them everything? He said, yeah. I said, well, that's all you can expect, mate. That's whenever I say, when he says he's had a bad one, I say, did you do what you went to do? And he says, yeah. I said, okay. That's all you can do, mate.
Yeah.
You can only go and give it your best. What you mustn't do is be disheartened and think to yourself, it's not worth playing this gig. You've got to ramp it up if there's nobody there.
Okay.
And push it even harder. And, if only for your own benefit.
Yeah.
So, we talk about those kind of things.
And I know you, because you're very supportive of newer artists. I know Stormzy is someone who you've championed. Nadine Shah, I saw an interview with her where she calls you Uncle Billy.
Yeah, well, yeah, she's great, Nadine.
What do you tell these people? Do you mentor them? Is it that kind of relationship?
I wouldn't say I mentor them, but a young singer-songwriter, British singer-songwriter, I bumped into him at a North American folk festival. And he was saying, I've been trying so hard, Bill, to change the world, I'm like, mate, it's not down to you. You mustn't take responsibility for that. Woody's guitar didn't actually kill fascists. You know that, don't you? It's an idea. That's what we're dealing in. We're dealing in ideas. Don't put it on yourself. There have been singer-songwriters that did that. Phil Oakes put it on himself and blamed himself when the world didn't change and subsequently committed suicide. So you've got to understand your role in it and not think that that everything hinges on you. You've got to put the responsibility onto the audience, really. So I have that conversation with people when they get a bit, when times become a bit confusing, times become a bit hard.
Yeah. Had that happen to you? Did you have to learn that?
Yeah, I think I sort of learned that early on. I was, when I was a fan of The Clash, I believed they were going to change the world. And I think they did too, which is a bit naive. But during the miners' strike, I had the opportunity. When the miners' strike came along, I was like, okay, this is where I'm going to get to find out if music can change the world. Because here I am, solid performer, political, get stuck in, let's see what happens. And the experience from the miners' strike led me to then go up a notch on that and push it even further with Red Wedge. We could do this now. We could go for the 87 election and see what we can do. And, Thatcher still won, but the experience of that made me understand that the role that we have is to inspire people and charge up their activism, but not that music doesn't actually have agency. People would like it to, but it doesn't. And I think to suggest it does to your audience is to betray their trust. You've got to lay the responsibility for changing the world on them.
Because I have always wondered with songwriters who are very politically active, at some point, does discouragement set in? Is there a point where you've realised I'm still singing about this and nothing's changed?
The enemy of all of us who want to make the world a better place is not capitalism or conservatism, it's cynicism. And we're all prone to it. And particularly the enemy of those of us who want to change the world, our own cynicism, our own sense that nothing will change, our own sense that nobody gives a shit about this stuff, our own feeling that it's all gone to pot. And in a time of Trump and Brexit and climate change, it's easy to give in to that. But you got to, if you want to be a progressive, let's not even use the S word. If you want to be a progressive, you've got to be able to see the glass is half full. If you think it's always half empty, that everyone's out to get you, you're never going to really be able to connect with the fundamental humanity that you need to put forward their ideas and make the world a better place. So I work very hard to curb my cynicism.
Right.
We're all prone to it.
Yeah.
And with Brexit going down, it's hard sometimes to cast it out, but I try not to give into it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I have my cynical days.
Yeah.
But I try not to. It's a monkey on your shoulder if you let it be. And by cynic, I don't mean doubt. Doubt's the most human of all vices, I think. Never trust anyone who has no doubts.
Yeah.
Or skepticism. You can learn stuff off someone who's a bit skeptical. I'm talking about a cynic. Cynic is someone who's given up and they want you to give up because it makes them feel better.
Yeah.
I don't have time for those people in my life anymore.
After the break, Billy talks about turning 60, the biggest misconceptions about his career, and his memories of working with Wilco. Welcome back to Humans of Music and my interview with Billy Bragg. I often wonder with artists who are politically active whether they can feel a burden of expectation. And by that I mean whether people are always looking to them for answers or to embrace the latest cause. So I asked Billy if he ever felt that.
I just write about things that piss me off. Sometimes it's politics, sometimes it's love, sometimes it's the weather.
Okay.
You know, the thing that I do feel is unfair is that people, because I write political songs, they expect the gigs to just be like a political rally. You know, I played the Roundhouse probably 10 years ago now, and my sound man was clearing the stage, and one of the security guys said to him, "Oh, I quite enjoyed that." He said, "How do you mean?" He said, "Well, I thought Billy Bragg would be all political, but he was actually quite funny." I'm like, I don't mind being labelled a political songwriter because that's the bed I've made, but it's easy to then to be dismissed as a political songwriter. That's what I object to. That's what I worry about.
Yeah.
So I try and make sure it's balanced in my live set and in the music that I put out. You know, I put out I published a book of lyrics, Faber and Faber, published a couple of years ago, of a selection of all my lyrics, all different kinds, but we called it A Lover Sings, because I think I write more love songs than I write political songs.
Yeah. And I guess is that one of the biggest misconceptions about you?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Is that the biggest?
Yeah, I think it probably is, yeah. What other misconceptions of... I think, it's probably the biggest, yeah.
He says with a smile.
Well, I was trying to think what other people have misconceptions about me. There's not really much to misconceive, really, is there? Apart from that.
Okay. And as we were talking about before the interview started about Jackster and the fact that it's about songwriting credits and artist credits and really giving credit where it's due. Who would you give credit to in terms of people who have helped you with your career and people who you've learned from? Well,
Peter Jenner would obviously be a prime candidate for that. But also Wiggy, who I grew up with, and we, dreamt in my parents' back room that we would one day tour the world, and we did, playing music. Sharing that experience with him was, really helped to keep me grounded. My partner Juliet, who now manages me, and in the 1970s, she managed a Selector during Two Tone. And, she's done every job in the music industry except what I do. And I think she probably has a better idea of who Billy Bragg is any given time than I do. She kind of knows exactly where I should be and exactly what I should be doing in a way that I'm like, oh yeah, didn't think of that. So kind of, she's, it's invaluable to have a partner who understands why I'm sitting here talking to you now.
Yeah.
Because she planned this, She's kind of totally cool with that. Whereas before, I had girlfriends who, why are you doing this? Why are you over there? Why aren't we, But Juliet, although it's tough being apart, and it was even tougher when Jack was little. It's a collective effort. This,
Yeah.
I probably couldn't do it without her support.
Do you get to switch off? Can the two of you switch off?
Yeah, we do. We do other things. Over the summer, I write books.
Yeah.
I've been writing books the last couple of years. That's really great. After the time on the road with Tooth and Nail, spent a lot of blood and a lot of treasure on that record. I just needed a break, do something else, and that's when I wrote the Skiffle book.
Yeah.
And the great thing about writing a book is that in the music industry, if you say, "Oh, I'd love to do it, but I'm afraid I'm writing a book, I've got a deadline," it's like saying, "Oh, excuse me, my wife's having a baby. Would you mind giving her a seat?" You know, people are like, "Whoa, he's writing a book." Whoa. So it was so good that I carried on saying it 6 months after I delivered the bloody thing. So it really saved me from doing a lot of daft things. It's shameful, isn't it? But you just need to get about. You know, we all struggle with our work-life balance. My brother's a bricklayer; he has the same problem with his work-life balance. So
Yeah.
you know, it's
Okay.
kind of just about how you approach things. I turned 60 last year.
Yeah.
So I'm still doing this, and I feel it's a real privilege to still be able to come to the other side of the world and people still be interested in what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Because I know lots of artists who I thought were much better songwriters than me, and nicer people too, who haven't managed to keep it together.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a huge privilege, and I'm glad to be back and connecting with people again.
Yeah. Was 60 confronting?
No, it's kind of, you can't kid yourself you're young anymore when you're 60. But I don't feel 60. But I do have a senior rail card, which allows me to get cheap trains up to London. And if I get it out, people have to give me their seat on the train.
That's satisfying.
No, I'm joking. But yeah, it's sort of allows you to take a measure of things and think, well, you know, is this really worthwhile doing this? You know, might as well, you know, what am I doing here? What am I thinking about? And so I think in some ways the writing the books is a kind of third age thing. Do something different for a bit.
Okay.
So that when you come back to making records and doing gigs, you're fresh for it.
Yeah.
Rather than just record and tour.
Yeah.
You can't just keep doing that incessantly, especially not now when, you know, nobody's buying records.
Right.
It's too expensive to keep making records every year.
And is that why you released the sort of the singles leading up to the...
Yeah, well, I mean, I think with digitisation, you can just knock stuff out now. You don't have to get the entire record company into gear and a huge production. You can just quietly make a little clip and get your ideas out there.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's a different model.
Yeah.
And rather than trying to resist that, I've always thought of and tried to think of ways to help me do my job better.
Yeah.
You know, I've never been one of those Spotify resistors. You know, I think if people are going to stream music, then we better start working out how we're going to connect with them, because that's just how they're consuming music now. It's all about discovery now. It's all about discovery. That's why I've started doing these gigs where I'm playing the first 3 albums and the second 3 albums, because young people are discovering those albums again.
Yeah.
You know, they're coming and they're asking for songs from that period. So it's a different way of consuming music, and it's not something we should be afraid of.
Yeah.
You know.
Those first 3 albums, you were almost the definition of a solo artist, you and a guitar.
Yep.
But then you seem to have got also a lot of energy from from collaborating with artists such as Wilco and Joe Henry. Have you learned things about yourself from that collaboration process?
You always do that. You always learn by playing. You always learn by watching other musicians. You know, when I go and see a performer, particularly if it's a solo performer, I'm always enjoying the music, but also technically assessing what they're doing and how they're doing it and what the dynamics are like of the night. So you always learn something from that. But yeah, I've found collaborating with other musicians is always engaging. You know, I mean, Joe's been a dear friend of mine for a long time, and we've had opportunities. He's put on gigs where he's brought musicians together to work together, and he's invited me to do that, and travelling on the train with him and then touring with him. That's been brilliant. And going in with Wilco on a project like Mermaid Avenue, where it's all, you know, we can literally make any kind of music we want. So yeah, and it was also, you know, Wilco were in a state of flux at the time, moving from their sort of old country to their kind of more psychedelic phase. So just to catch them in that space as well was really, really exciting. There was a great sort of sense of that record. any day we could just say, who are we going to be today? Let's be Tom Waits today. Let's be, country period Bob Dylan. Let's be anyone but Woody Guthrie, really. It was like a big dressing up box. And we ended up recording like 50 tracks. That was the thing.
Yeah.
That's because we were having such a great time. We were only supposed to record 15. And by the end of the period, we had a huge piece of paper as big as this duvet here with all the songs written on and who'd play what and where and everything. And I tell you what, if we could find that, put it on eBay, make a fortune. I often say that to Grant Showbiz, who produced my part of the record. What did you do with it? He said, I'll probably binned it. Because I remember us all standing looking at it in the studio like, wait, something's got to go in there.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go back and do that. Yeah, it was a great experience.
Oh, that's great. Billy, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, man. I enjoyed it.
Great to talk to you.
Pleasure.
And that's it from me. Thank you very much for listening, and a big thanks also to Billy for his time. This episode was co-produced by Bo Adams and recorded at New Holland Studios in Darlinghurst. It was engineered by Lachlan Mitchell, and the theme and incidental music were written and performed by Sam Lockwood. Please remember to subscribe to the Humans of Music podcast so you never miss an episode. Feel free to share it amongst your friends, jump online and rate and review it, and I will forever be grateful. And remember, for all your music credits and to get the story behind the music, head to Jackster.com, and while you're there, sign up for a free 30-day trial of Jackster Pro. Until the next episode of Humans of Music, I'm Rod Yates. Thank you for listening.